Hi everybody, welcome to Sprague Woodturning. My name is Jim. If you haven't been here before, this is predominantly a turning channel where each week I show people how to make things on the lathe. This week we are going to be working with some fantastic maple. And this is spalted maple. We've got some really cool pencil line spalting in it. And I have another piece to go with this. And what we're going to do is combine Designer Epoxy's 5 new hyper shifts all in one batch. This thing should be so shifty we won't even be able to hold on to it. So that's what we're going to do this week. First things first, we need to cut these to size, get them cleaned up, and then we'll get mixing some epoxy. All right, so this is the bucket that we're going to use. There's a template that goes in the bottom of it, like so. This is another piece that I pulled from stock that I think will work. I want, the bottom of this, I think the majority of this is going to be wood. So all I'm going to do is take some Gorilla Tape here. I could get out my circle cutting jig to do this, but I think that this should work just fine. Stick this down on top of here. And, I'm trying to keep straight edges out of here. I want natural edges, so that's the main idea here, if you haven't seen this before. And then all I'm going to do is just trace this outline with a black marker, and then we'll be able to cut this on the bandsaw. Something like that. We can fine-tune that afterwards. So there's the outline on that one. And I'm just going to leave that one on there, and then we'll cut this on the bandsaw. As you watch me cut up these pieces, I'd like to personally thank you all for stopping in to watch this week's video. Working with spalted maple is certainly one of my more favorite woods to work with. The color variations, the pencil line spalting that you don't get all the time, but in certain pieces you certainly do, is really, really cool to work with, and it really gives you a really unique look. Once we got these pieces cut, of course, we need to remove this bark. And again, this is predominantly for the new people that watch or new to my channel and watching the video today. It is important to remove any bark prior to doing any casting. I'm going to take this over on the belt sander. This has got anchor seal on the bottom of it, so I want to get rid of that so that I can glue this down inside the bucket. Then we'll go over to the lathe and brush all this stuff off. Must say though, this is pretty light. Lots of dry rot in this. Another reason why it's important to remove anchor seal, and if you're not familiar with what that is, it's essentially a liquid wax that dries clear, and that prevents moisture from leaving the wood too fast, because that's how cracks happen. So wood turners, we like to use this to slow down the release of moisture so that our pieces don't crack. But of course you can't stick anything to it, including epoxy, so that's why it's important to remove it. On the bottom it may not be so bad, but on the side, if you've got some anchor seal and the epoxy doesn't stick to it, then a big piece of that could come off and hit you when you're on the lathe with it. All right, that should do. Let's get some resin mixed up. Since this is a deep pour, we need a deep casting epoxy, so that's why we're going to be using deep casting epoxy from Designer Epoxy. Very important to mix your epoxies correctly, get your ratios correct, and of course, if you're having issues with it curing, it could be a temperature thing as well. Now, like I said earlier, we're going to be using 5 of these hyper shifts in this one casting. To be honest with you, after I mixed them all together, it was giving me, a copper gold kind of color, and I wasn't really happy with that. So, I'm just putting a 1/4 teaspoon of each one of these in the mix. And in the end, I have to alter the mix a little bit to bring it to kind of the color that I was hoping it would look like. But I also had to use a mechanical mixer here because there was a lot of pigments in there, and I wanted to make sure that they're mixed in there thoroughly. Well, all those colors together give us almost a copper color. I'm not sure if I'm happy with that or not. Let's put a little bit more green red and grass green in it. There, that gives it a little bit of a more bronzy color, I find, anyway. All right, I'm expecting this is going to take 2 of these, but let's find out. Yeah, it's probably going to even take more than that. Anyway, I'll bring it back when I'm ready. All right, here's the next 1.5 liters. I'm just going to mix up another 3/4 liter, and I'll be right back. And here's 3/4 liter. Unfortunately, we're probably going to have to add more than this. I'm going to throw this in the vacuum chamber because there's lots of rotten punky wood in this. So I think that that would probably be a good practice to do that. So vacuum chamber is coming up next. Okay, here we go. Still some confusion over why I use the vacuum chamber sometimes and other times I don't. If these 2 pieces of wood were solid pieces of wood without any cracks, all I would have done is threw the epoxy into the bucket and threw it into the pressure pot. But unfortunately, when you're working with spalted pieces of wood, a lot of times they can have a lot of dry rot in them. It's essentially nature is breaking down the wood, which we want Mother Nature to do. But of course, it gives us those nice colors and pencil lines. So, you know, it's a beautiful thing to work with, but it's a difficult thing to work with. So by essentially throwing this into the vacuum chamber, it's going to draw all the air out of the wood. And then when you release the vacuum, since the wood is submerged in the epoxy, it will draw that epoxy into the wood, essentially stabilizing. It's not true stabilizing, but that's essentially what you're doing here. Now, another example would be the Banksia pods. So when the seeds are removed out of those Banksia pods, they create voids. And if that pod is on its side, well, air is going to get trapped up inside of those little void areas. So by throwing those into the vacuum chamber, you can draw that air out of there and for the most part, get rid of all of those bubbles. So once this is done, it will go into the pressure pot, and the combination of the vacuum chamber and the pressure pot will, for the most part, ensure that any of the soft punky wood has been saturated by the epoxy, and it'll make a nice, strong casting to work with. All right, so there you go. That is full vacuum. When I cycle it off 6 times, something like that. I don't know if that stick is helping or not, but hey, any help is some help. Anyway, I'm going to let this go for probably about another half hour, and I'll bring you back when that's done. All right, that's been 45 minutes. I'm just going to release the vacuum and get this in the pressure pot. All right, I'll take that stick out of there, and we'll see you guys in there in 3 days. Oh, that's heavy. Well, good morning. As you can see, I actually tinted the art cast before I put it in with the exact same mixture of pigments. Hopefully, anyway, it looks pretty similar. All right, let's get this out of here and get this on the lathe. Sorry to disappoint. What does it tell you? The colors are pretty spot on. It's not much difference at all. Very happy with that. All right, let's get some centers. So one thing to note, when that came out of the vacuum chamber, it really did look bronzy like it is now. It wasn't so much a gold or a copper, so I was happy with that. Even after throwing this in the vacuum chamber and the pressure pot on day 2, when I opened this up, there was still It had dropped off a 1/2 inch in height. I'll take that. So then I figured, okay, what I'm going to do is I was just going to pour clear. And sometimes I probably wouldn't bother with this, but the fact that there was those big cracks, if you remember in the big piece, there was a really big cracks where those were exposed all the way to the top. And I knew that if I didn't fill those in somehow, that it was really going to be a problem. So that's why I decided to do the second pour. I don't know what happened to the footage from that. Sometimes if the battery dies on the camera when you're filming, it doesn't seem to record all of the footage and you lose it. And I think that's what happened this time. Regardless, we've got a nice solid casting, and that is the important thing. I should also mention that we are using the number 3 Hercules from Hunter Tool Systems. And just like all of my sponsors, check out the links in the description that will take you to their sites. And by using my code InlayJim, you'll get a discount on your purchase. So just like always, we're going to strip off all this excess epoxy and get down to basically raw wood and go from there and figure out exactly what we're going to do. In the end, because you've seen the thumbnail, I did decide to turn this into a bowl. I haven't really done, other than the 3 cores that I did last week, I haven't really done a whole lot of bowls recently, so I thought that this was a good candidate. I also initially thought that this would have made a really cool holoform, and it certainly would have as well. But I was looking for a different bowl shape, so that's what I decided to go with this week. There is just all that pencil line spalting in this piece is absolutely amazing. And when it's combined with the epoxy, you'll see it coming up here that, it just gives it, all that light wood is now dark, and it's almost like a black on black effect. Very cool look. And there you go. The color variations within this, I think, is what really makes this piece. The spalting, the dark and light areas. I really, really like this piece. So much going on. Still some areas where it needed to be removed, so that's what I was pointing to there. I'll briefly talk about last week's video, and if you missed that, I will link it at the end of this video. But essentially, I took 3 cores and did them 3 different ways. I made a box, or say a lidded dish, a ring bowl, and just a straight bowl from 3 different cores. So if you missed that, I will link that at the end of this video. And thanks to those who did watch it last week, I really do appreciate it. So we're still working down through this, exposing essentially that wood on the top. I typically don't like that ghosting that you see on, if the resin is sitting on top of the wood. So in most cases, I will always get rid of that. That's just me. I know that some people will leave it behind, but it's just, I don't usually like the look of it. So that's why you'll see me whittle these pieces down. This could have been, maybe about a 1/2 inch taller is really all we're losing off of the overall size of this. And if it kind of looks like some sort of swamp monster at the lathe with stuff hanging off my helmet. A lot of people are asking what I'm wearing for self-powered respirator, and that is the power cap from JSP. That's what I'm wearing, and so far so good. I don't even know how long I've had this now. 6 months. I did find that the button that's on the battery does seem to have a hole in it now for whatever reason. So I'm thinking about contacting Peak Safety, because I don't think that should be there already. But other than that, it's been a good purchase, and I like the fact that it's a lot lighter than the Trend that I was using prior to it. So you can see the epoxy has really penetrated this piece. Still lots of pencil line spalting here. Absolutely love pencil line spalting. And if you're wondering why it's like this, essentially the spalting is a fungus and it seals off parts of the wood from competing fungi. So that's why you get these pencil lines. Anyway, it's called pencil line spalting. Here's a really good example of it there. And that's why it didn't penetrate into this portion of the casting. It's a really cool thing, and yeah, I mean, you just never know what you're going to get when you cut these things open. Little fainter here, but still very nice. This is going to be some really nice chatoyance right here. Big hole down in there. I don't know how far that goes, but it goes in quite a ways. You know, in order to maximize this spalting here, I think that we're just going to do a simple rounded off form. I've already started here. The center of this will be the high point, and we'll just round this off. I might even make it into an enclosed bowl. I'm not really sure yet, or hull form. But first thing we got to do is reverse this and get it cleaned up and get a glue block on the bottom, and then we can figure all the other stuff out. I can see all kinds of color variations within this too. Those 5 hyper shifts are really coming through. A little bit of wood or a little bit of resin to remove from here yet, but you can definitely see it. And of course, these thermal pockets that you see here that create all of this really neat designs that you get with the epoxy is really cool too. All right, yeah, let's get this reversed, bottom cleaned off, and then glue block. So that was in the moment, and as you've seen by the thumbnail, I didn't really go in that direction. As I was working this piece, the form kind of developed as I was working on it, and eventually I abandoned the idea of making like an enclosed bowl. That certainly would have looked nice as well, but this profile was something that we hadn't done before, so, well, we had done maybe 1 or 2 pieces that might be similar to it, but the coves on this piece near the top, I think, really add to it. And I'll just mention that that is an end grain hard maple waste block that I'm gluing on there with high temperature hot melt glue from an electric frying pan. So I got lots of volume. This will become a problem. I don't want to spoil it for you, but this will become a problem, and I'll basically have to change gears on what I'm doing later on. One thing when you're on the lathe and you're working with stuff like this, you have to be flexible. It's not always going to go your way. As you've probably seen here a number of times on this channel, rarely do you have a piece that maybe doesn't present some sort of a challenge to you, so you have to be able to adapt to those things and anyway, push through them, as we used to say in the Army. But anyway, I like this piece, and hopefully you guys do in the end as well. So here is your weekly house update, selling house update. I'll add to this, and if you're new and this is the first video you've ever watched, my wife and I are selling our current home and moving to the east coast of Canada, building a new house in a much larger workshop on family land. And well, there's nothing to report. It's still extremely slow. We haven't had any showings. We've relisted the house, and we're going to update the pictures because we have winter pictures for the house, and so that's not really so great when you're trying to sell a house. So we're going to do new summer pictures. Along with that, we've also hired a stager, so she's going to help us out. I don't think there's a ton of work to do here because my wife and I have done a lot of putting stuff away and decluttering, but you know, she's already given us a few suggestions, and we've done that. And so anyway, she'll come in and she'll work her magic, and you know, we'll update the pictures, and hopefully things pick up, because it's, you know, it's still very slow, still very early for house hunters to be in that are being posted to the base here. And so anyway, that's all there is there's not much more to it than that. We're still in a holding pattern, waiting for an offer to come. I do make this foot a little bit smaller, but not much smaller than what it is now. And again, those color variations are just, I don't know, it's like a Dalmatian bowl almost. Here's where, my intention was I was going here. I was going to, I'm going to close this bowl in a little bit. And then I got looking at it and I said, might be kind of neat to have a little cove at the top of this. That way there is a bit of a witness line. I'd be able to disguise it in there. And to be perfectly honest with you, the only reason you know that there's one there is because I've told you. But for the most part, it disappears when I do make this cove. And, again, it's just max flex on the lathe. Look at something and, shut the lathe off regularly and, it'll appear to you. And you're like, yeah, that's it. That looks really nice. Let's go with that. All right, we were all set up and ready for coring. This is the one-way coring setup from oneway.ca. I have the #1 knife set in to do this. And of course, the CoPro cutter. This is going to eat this stuff up. Unfortunately, I've got John Tully's tailstock extender on here, but I don't think we're going to be able to use it. If you look down here, the rig is over quite a ways, so this is going to have to go in quite a distance before we're going to be able to get any tailstock support. So let's hope nothing bad happens until we can, or we get the core out of here. So you'll see that there's already a groove cut. Remember what I was saying when the battery dies, the footage was lost? Well, when I first attempted to do this, the glue block snapped off the bottom of the casting cleanly. And all it was just glue between the casting and the joint. I was having a real hard time getting a good solid bite on that hard maple. I think what I'm going to do is switch to birch, because birch, I should be able to get a better bite on it in the future. Anyway, this is the second attempt at coring this, and it isn't going well. All right, this ain't going to happen. It keeps coming loose in the chuck. This is going to get ripped off of here, and it's going to get smashed. So, you know what? I'm just going to drill down through the center of this, move it outboard, and then carry on with cleaning out the inside. I want to save this core, but it isn't worth destroying this piece to get it. So I don't know if you're picking up the frustration in my voice. I typically don't let these things get to me because I just know that this is just sometimes the way that it is. I just accept the fact that, every day is going to be a Monday some days. But this actually was a Monday. And the way that I typically like to start my videos is no later than Monday, because of the multiple coats of finish that I put on these pieces. So, I need to start these. I basically have to have the piece in its first coat of finish on Monday. And because Tuesday would be the second coat, Wednesday would be the third coat if it's needed. And then, of course, you shoot the outro on Thursday. So, at this stage, we're starting to get late in the day Monday, and I've probably been at this for a good solid 6 hours. And I knew that I still had quite a ways to go here. With the epoxy that had penetrated this wood, it was extremely difficult to cut. It was actually rock solid, more than usual, which is kind of funny. So anyway, once this was drilled out, I switched it outboard. So we're just cleaning up the outside of this, because of course every time you take it out of the chuck and put it back in the chuck, then it's not going to be running true typically. Sometimes you might get lucky, sometimes it will, but in most cases it won't. And then I proceeded to whittle out the rest of this on the inside. It's too bad, because this would have been a nice core, but you just got to really kind of look at the economics of it. If this thing comes off the lathe and hits the floor, then you may have lost a substantial amount of money. instead of, you know, $100 to $150 core that's in the center of this. So that's kind of the way I approach these things. Again, I'm a firm believer that something will tell you if it wants to be created or not. In the when I was a mechanic in the Army, we had, if you worked on a vehicle and it, you know, it just had all kinds of problems and it just seemed to never quit. And we used to call them hanger queens. I don't know why we call them that, but that's what they were called. And they would just sit around the workshop, and it would just be, you'd fix something, and then it would go out, and then it would come back with a total different related problem. And, you know, the thing would just fight you every step of the way. And that's kind of where this was going with this. Really, the only way that I might have been able to get this core out, and I probably would have been successful, would have been to set up the steady rest and go through all of that. But, you know, it's like I said, I was running out of time, but in reality, it took so long to get the inside of this out that it probably would have been in my benefit to set up the steady rest, take the core out, and then move it outboard and finish it off. The other problem with the fact that this is so deep compared to its width is there still would have been about 2 inches of material left in the base of the bowl, because you can't move the coring rig base in far enough to get down to your 1/2 inch wall thickness. I really, really would like to see somebody develop some sort of a steady rest to deal, or not a steady rest, a tailstock support somehow to hold these castings, to make life a lot easier when you're working on these small diameter castings. If this is 12 inches in diameter, it's not a problem, because the rig will be more to the left, and then you can bring up tailstock support, and you know, this is not an issue. But if you don't have that wide casting, then of course you're forced to use the smaller coring rig or coring knife set, and well, it just sometimes doesn't work, and you've seen that here a number of times on this channel that it didn't work. Anyway, it was max flex when you're a wood turner, because you're going to need it. You're going to need it. Another thing that was not typical most of the time when I'm working with pieces like this is that I'm using the Hercules well above center. I was having issues cutting it cleanly, and once I started using the cutter well above center, like you see me using it here, it seemed to cut better. And I'm not exactly sure why that is. It could be the fact that the majority of this is end grain. Regardless, we get it eventually. And we're, you know, I don't want to spoil it, but we're not done yet. We're not done yet. That's the 3.5 inch dipple disc from sandpaper.ca. Again, the link is in the description to get some. Fantastic. I absolutely love these nipple discs. And this piece was sanded from 60 to 180. We do encounter some issues with sanding that we'll have to deal with, but overall the sanding went fairly well. Not too many issues. Alrighty, this is 3 ounces of the Pro Series. And a silicone barbecue brush. Now I could dump this epoxy into this bowl and then use my hand to smooth it out. I prefer to use a brush because you can basically control how much you're putting on. Because if you put on too much of this epoxy, it can be quite messy. Well, what do you think? Really like this little detail, like how this is swept in a bit. It's almost like a pot of gold. Maybe that's what we'll call this piece. To be honest with you, I see different types of hypershift when I look down on it here, but I don't see it so much. You've got to be looking at it at an angle in order to see much difference. I mean, it definitely is kind of bronzy gold dominated, that's for sure. One of the things that I absolutely really like about this piece is the wood and the resin staining in it. Just gives it so much character. Crazy looking stuff. And this one here is pretty much all penetrated by the epoxy. Now there is one area that's a problem, and it's right here. And that's where the wood was softer or more rotten than the wood around it, so it's indented a little bit. So what I will probably do tomorrow is trim that. Now that this has an epoxy coat in it, it's hopefully absorbed a lot of that and hardened that grain. So then I'll trim that back tomorrow. That's the plan. I might leave it, but I'll probably trim it back and then carry on with sanding. Anyway, let me know in the comments what you think, especially the profile. See you tomorrow. Well, good morning. This is what we're looking at. This is that area right there. That's the problem. That light spot. If I had to guess, I'd say it's in, easily an eighth. So, I could just trim this area, but I think that it's probably best if I just give the whole inside a trimming. And the good thing about this epoxy coat was there was some cracks down in here. Those are all filled in now, so that's great. But if I only trim in one area and then sand, then I think that there's going to be an issue as far as the way that when the waterlocks goes on, what it's going to look like. So that's why I'm doing it that way. But there's some dry spots. Ironically, wherever there's an issue with dry spots, that's that really soft, punky grain, and that's another reason to do an epoxy coat. So even after using the vacuum chamber and then the pressure pot, deep down inside of this casting, there were still pieces or areas of it that still needed more stabilizing. This is not uncommon when you're working with pieces like this. Like I said earlier, if you're working with solid pieces of wood, I think that you could probably just put the epoxy into this piece, set it on the bench, and you wouldn't need anything else. But, I do find that pieces like this visually are stunning and a lot better than just straight solid wood pieces. But again, you don't need a pressure pot or a vacuum chamber to do this type of work, but it certainly will aid you in making really nice castings. So that's why I recommend getting at least a vacuum chamber when you're working with epoxies like this, or difficult pieces of wood. I decided to trim the outside. Initially wasn't going to, but I decided to trim the outside. And I'm just taking the Starbond thin here and putting it on those areas. And I was really encouraged to see that it wasn't really soaking into the wood. If it was soaking into the wood, then I knew that the epoxy really probably hadn't done its job. So, I was encouraged by that. And anyway, once this is all trimmed up, again, it'll be sanded from 60 to 800. And then, like I usually do, I'll use the Triple E buffing compound from the Beal buffing system and use the denatured alcohol after that to clean this piece prior to its first coat of Waterlux. It has been a chore getting here, but, I think that it's definitely worth the work. Because this, I think, is a visually stunning piece, and hopefully you guys enjoy it as well. It was just, a little frustrating to work on, that's all. But sometimes the best pieces are the most frustrating pieces that you've worked on. That's really a thing. All right, this is the first coat of Waterlux Gloss. Alrighty, there it is there. Definitely will need another coat, maybe even 2 coats. Just love the different color variations within that piece of wood. It's really cool, and of course, the hyper shift. See if we can get it to shift. You see that since we're so aggressive on the tool work and the sanding, that yeah, we're definitely going to need at least one more coat before it'll be ready to be to have the foot done. Anyway, let me know in the comments what you think. If there is another coat, well, there will be another coat. I'll do it the same way as this one, and we'll see you over here on the bottom. All I'm showing there is how the clamping pressure from the chuck. I'm still a little baffled that it got pulled out of there twice. Parts of that are almost kind of squared off. So the chuck had a really good bite on this tenon, but it just, I don't know, just one of those things that it just did not want to cooperate. So we're just going to use the 5/8 bowl gouge here from David Ellsworth to get rid of the majority of this. And then you'll see me switch out to the Hercules to finish it off. And of course, on the bottom of this piece, it was sanded from 80 to 400. I didn't really see the need to go any higher than that. And I also did some engraving on the bottom of this too. It's so busy that I figured I would do that instead of trying to write my signature on there. All right, well, that's going to do for the video. Special thanks to everybody that has watched the video all the way through. I really do appreciate it. And thanks again to the membership. You guys are awesome. Yeah, let's have a last little chat about this week's project. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Well, what do you think about this week's project? Cannot go wrong with spalted maple. As I said in the video, it certainly is not an easy thing to work with. Can be if you catch it soon enough, then it's not a problem. But a lot of times, if you want some really nice spalting like there is in this, then you're going to have to let your logs sit around for a longer time. And then, of course, you're kind of battling the bugs and you're battling Mother Nature. So, it's when I would get logs, I would seal them and set them outside for a year. I would check them after a year, year and a half, usually is what it took. And but of course, it's who's going to get to it first, you or the bugs? And so anyway, it's nice to be able to show you a really nice piece of pencil line spalted maple. Here is the bottom, and as per normal, it needs the finish applied because I'm out of time. Let me see. Dimensions on this are 8.5 inches across, and it's about 5 inches tall, and it's probably around a 1/2 inch wall thickness, thereabouts. And I should mention that this piece is for sale. If you're interested, send me an email to spraguewoodturning@gmail.com, and I will disclose the price then in case this is a gift. Anyway, I think this is really beautiful. Really like this detail where it's swept in and then the cove above. And it just goes to show, like I was on the lathe and I was like, yeah, I'm going to turn this into a closed in hollow form or closed in bowl. And so we would have lost this detail. And I think that would have looked good as well. But I just think that this little detail at the top really sets this piece off. Anyway, let me know. Don't forget to put designer epoxy in the comments down below to be entered into the next 3-gallon giveaway at 130,000 when we get there. And speaking of designer epoxy, they have a sale starting today until the 12th for the Mother's Day sale, and it's only on the deep cast. So 3-gallon kit of deep cast, and this is a fantastic price, is $209 Canadian, and that's $182 US thereabouts. And along with that, you're going to get a free mixer and a free 3-ounce jar of pigments, pearl pigments, random colors that they'll put in with your order. So that's a great price. If you've been waiting to try designer epoxy, now is the time. And during this sale, of course, my code won't work because that's a better deal than what you'll get with my code. Along with that, don't forget about our sponsors in the description down below. If you need some stuff, head on down there and put some money back in your pocket. Next week, we are going to be doing another Hypershift project. This here really, when I first seen the 3 pigments, it should have, in the back of my mind, I should have said, okay, this is going to be a goldish bronze type pigment, but I don't know, I never really thought about it. And so anyway, I'm just going to use one pigment next week, and I'm also going to be working with a species of wood that I've never worked with. Well, very little, because don't see a lot of it around here. So anyway, that will be next week. All right, thanks for watching the video. I really do appreciate it. Take care, stay safe. Don't forget the bell. Please share my videos with your friends. That is the largest way for me to build my presence here on YouTube. I would greatly appreciate that. And have yourself a fantastic weekend. And happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. See you next week.